I'm a big believer in learning by doing. At my last church, even as an associate pastor, I tended to create opportunities to speak because I knew that if I were not there, someone else would be there to bring the Word of God. As a result, I have given more than 3,000 sermons. And I say this not to brag, but to point out that a lot of those have been with the lectionary. I understand that the sojourners will be studying the lectionary pretty directly, right? It's a collection of scriptures that are given to the churches, that the churches have agreed on, so to speak, so that we could get through the Bible in a 3-year period. And there's several scriptures to choose from in these, and ordinarily I'll take the easy way out. Ordinarily I'll look at the one that's easy and that's a soft scripture, even though it covers all of the scripture. But today, 3,000 sermons later, it's time to start tackling some of the more difficult verses. So this comes not from my choice, but from the lectionary today. Mark 10, we'll go verses 1 through 12. Jesus then left the place and went into the region of Judea across the Jordan. Again, crowds of people came to him, and as was his custom, he taught them. Some Pharisees came and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" "What did Moses command you?" he replied. They said, "Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away." "It was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote this law," Jesus replied. "But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but are one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." When they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this, and he answered, "Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery." That's a pretty hard word. And you could use that to hammer all kinds of people, because I happen to know that 1 in 3 marriages, or is it 2 in 3? I forget. At least 1 in 3 marriages ends in divorce. Would not be surprised to learn, though I don't know specifically, that there are persons in this church who have had the misfortune of getting a divorce. I've had the good fortune of being marrying a patient woman who puts up with me, and therefore it so happens I have not suffered a divorce. It takes 2 to make a marriage, but it only takes 1 to make a divorce. So please understand that my word today is not about divorce. It's about something else. Divorce is a concept in the Bible. When they talked about idolatry, they would talk about it as divorce. When they talked about apostasy, when they talked about leaving the faith, when they talked about forgetting the God that brought you out of Egypt, he would talk about divorce. God would say, "Where is my writ of divorcement? Who said that we were divorced from you? You're my bride." And God said, "I hate divorce." Now, yes, he was talking about literal divorce, but Jesus is talking about something deeper here. Even deeper. In Matthew, he states it a little differently. Some Pharisees came to him to test him. "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" That's what they were looking for any and every reason. Isn't it true that God has given us a provision to divorce our wives, and it doesn't matter why? Can't I divorce my wife and leave my wife for no reason at all? Can't I just leave her for some trivial reason? So the law of Moses came in and said, if you would divorce your wife, give her a certificate of divorcement. Give her a writ of divorce. And why was that? Because there was the tendency to just pretend you'd never been married, or just walk away and leave her with nothing. And now it's up to her to explain her plight to the people around her. Moses was giving us one of those at least laws. At least. If you're going to divorce your wife, at least put it in writing. At least give her a certificate so that she can go to the court and be released from certain obligations, so that she can find another husband and be released from that obligation so that she can return to her family, and having a husband who has abandoned her, at least give her a writ of divorcement. Write it down. And they would say, well, Moses said we could write it down. And that's all we have to do. Moses said that's all we need. Now, at the end, he says, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. And then the disciples said, listen to this. Then the disciples said to him, if this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry. You mean if I got to stay married forever? Well, then forget it. I think it'd be even better not to marry. What you have there is you got some of these guys are bachelors. Maybe one or two of them had a divorce. Maybe one or two of them was planning a divorce. And here goes Jesus saying this, and he said, well, then it's better not to even get married. Jesus said, well, everyone can't live according to that. Everyone can't live according to that. Jesus is basically saying, we talk about every wedding ceremony, we say that at the wedding at Cana, Jesus sanctified marriage, and here he's talking about the sanctity of marriage, and in this passage in Matthew, he's saying it's not for everybody to stay single. You can stay single. There's nothing wrong with it. Paul, in his wisdom given by God, would say that there are certain conditions under which if your spouse is content to stay married, then you should stay married. But if the spouse wants to leave, you should just let them leave. It's not on you that they leave. Divorce is just something that happens in our society. My word today is not about divorce. What I want to talk about is the hard heart. The hardness of heart that lets us drop an obligation. The hardness of heart that lets us break a promise. The hardness of heart that would actually let us abandon another human being. That's what I want to talk about today. That's what Jesus is talking about here. They're saying, oh, well, can't I just leave my wife for any reason? That's what Moses said I could do. And Jesus said, no, that's not how this works. You don't understand. Moses gave you that because of your hard hearts. If you didn't have a hard heart, those laws would not have been written. And see, that's the way the Old Testament laws are. That's the way, indeed, most religious law is anyway. It's not saying do this and you won't be sinning. It's saying do this and you won't be sinning too much. Did you ever realize that? Do this and you won't be sinning too much. You'll be stopping short of what would destroy your family or what might destroy society. Matthew chapter 5. One of his great sermons, I think this is Sermon on the Mount. He says, Jesus speaking to the people, teaching them. He says, first of all, he says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the least stroke of pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. So then I could pound my Bible and say, see, every jot, every tittle, that's what Jesus said. But then what else did Jesus say? You want to take what Jesus said as gospel, and of course we do. I suggest that. Take all of what Jesus said. All of it. He said, you have heard that it was said to people long ago, you shall not murder. And anyone who murders shall be subject to judgment. All right? We get that. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not murder. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother and sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Rakah, or you fool, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says you fool is in danger of the fire of hell. Yes, you shall not murder, but not only that, you shall not murder a relationship. You shall not murder a friendship. You shall not murder in that sense either. Here he also has his item of divorce. To reiterate that, to let us know that yes, this is one example of that Jesus is coming at with this hardness of heart. Here's another on adultery. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who even looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. That's where it says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, take it out and throw it away. Not only shall you not commit adultery, but you shall not let your mind astray or your heart stray from that spousal relationship. Again, you have heard it said from people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. If you're going to make a promise, if you're going to make a vow, then do your best to fulfill it. But then Jesus goes on and says, but I tell you, don't swear an oath at all. Not by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by earth, for it's His footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great King. Do not swear by your own head. You can't make even one hair white or black. They declare all notwithstanding. But all you need to say is simply yes or no, and anything else comes from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And that was said. That's written in the law of Moses. That's in the Bible. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Go. You got to watch it now. What goes around comes around. What you do to me, I'm going to do for you. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Again, Moses was not saying that's the right thing to do. He was saying that's the upper limit. You can't go any farther. If someone takes an eye, you can't take both of their eyes. You can only take the one. If someone knocks a tooth out, you can't knock all their teeth out. You can only knock out one. Show some restraint to keep our society going. But then Jesus, for us, for we Christians, for those of us that follow Jesus Christ, that standard's too low. We have a higher standard. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go a mile, give them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That was said. But Jesus holds us to a higher standard. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven, who causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. We have a higher standard. The laws written in, yes, they're written. It's in the Holy Book. It's in the Bible. We can go to it and read it and point it out and say, see here it says, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. See here it says, give your wife a writ of divorcement. See here it says in the Bible, we can do this. But Jesus holds us to an end. Jesus said, I'm not here to obliterate the law. But then Jesus turns around and holds us to an even higher standard. So many things happen to give us a hard heart. Give us a hard heart. Stephen in the book of Acts gives his great testimony to the Jewish people, to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Herodians. And he's telling them about Jesus, and he goes through all of their history. And then at the end he says, you stiff-necked people, your hearts and ears are still uncircumcised. You are just like your ancestors. They've always resisted the Holy Spirit, and here you are doing it again. And what did they do? They stuck their fingers in their ears because they didn't want to hear what he had to say. And then they stoned him to death. Paul was consenting on that. They intentionally hardened their own hearts. That's what I'm talking about. They hardened their own hearts. Jesus, talking to the disciples when he was walking on the water, said, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. He climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed. Why? For they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts had been hardened. They weren't paying attention. Another time he talked about the hard-heartedness, as he said, beware the leaven, the yeast of the Pharisees and the Herodians. And they said, oh, he's saying we didn't bring bread. He says, don't you remember how we split the loaves and fishes and fed the 5,000 people? Do you really think this? I'm talking to you about bread? Are your hearts so hardened that you're not paying attention? We have to let our hearts stay soft. Stay compassionate. Stay open-minded. The scripture that I read today is not about divorce. Lord knows Divorce is not good. We should never go dancing through the streets and say, hallelujah, we've got it done, you know. But we know that sometimes it happens because of our hard hearts. And we know that God has made provision for our hard hearts. God has even forgiven our hard hearts. But Jesus is holding us to a higher standard. The book of Hebrews says, see to it, brothers and sisters, that no one of you has sinful, unbelieving hearts that turn away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today, so that none of you is hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We've come to share in Christ, if indeed we hold our original conviction firmly to the very end. As it has been said, today if you hear your voice, do not harden your heart. To hear His voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. Sometimes we don't want to hear. Sometimes we just stick our fingers in our ears. No. Don't want to know what was said. Don't even want to know. Because we want to do what we think it's okay to do. Because the Old Testament says we can take an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and that's what we want to do. The Old Testament says we can get our debt back and we can throw them in debtor's prison, and that's what we want to do. The Old Testament says we can get a divorce for any and every reason, and that's what we want to do because our hearts are hard. We can ignore the poor because our hearts are hard. We can ignore the Word because our hearts are hard. And it seems to be a voluntary thing. It seems to be something that we can do. That we have a place in this. That, yes, there are times that Jesus hardened, God hardened the heart of Pharaoh in order to fulfill the great Exodus plan. That's true. God hardened his heart. But then it says, do not harden your hearts like they did so long ago. Do not harden your hearts. It reminds me of what Paul says in the book of Romans. Romans 13:8. Do not let no debt remain outstanding. And this is a statement about the law. It's a statement we say that, well, Jesus has abolished the law, and yet Jesus has fulfilled the law, and Paul has said that the law was a taskmaster, and that the law was just there to show us how sinful we are. What we just said about the hard heart kind of points that out. If you're going to have a hard heart, then you need the law. If you don't have a hard heart, maybe you don't need so much law. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be are summed up in this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. We talk about Pharisees and legalists and fundamentalists and Bible thumpers and all these things. We have a concept of people who are going to be rigorously using the rules. Now, this book, I would recommend you fall in love with this book. Fall in love with your Bible. Cover to cover, Old Testament, New Testament, Leviticus to Revelation, to fall in love with this book. Fall in love with this book. But when you fall in love with this book, receive the overall message. And the overall message ends with Jesus Christ. And He's the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. In the beginning, a loving God makes the world perfect. In the end, a loving Savior perfects us and perfects the world. And in between, it's all about how we mess up. In between, it's all about how God keeps our hard hearts from destroying the world. How God protects us from the hard hearts of others. And how our hard-heartedness causes us to lose kingdoms and to be banished into foreign lands and to lose family and to turn into pillars of salt or whatever all these complications are. And it's all about that. Don't harden your hearts like they did in the rebellion. Keep your heart open and soft. Keep it open to Jesus. You know, keep it open to Jesus. We can, if you don't have love, you know, Paul had the whole chapter of Corinthians 13. If I have not love, I'm like a tinkling brass. If I can preach and talk and all this other stuff, and if I don't have love, I'm a tinkling brass. I can get my body to be burned, and if I don't have love, I have nothing. If you don't have love, you have nothing. I think love plus Bible is really good stuff. It's really good stuff. Because a lot of people speak Bible. And if you can speak Bible in love, you can tell them what God has to say. But if you don't love, then please don't even talk about it. Please don't even do it. If you don't have that love, if you don't have that soft heart, if you don't have that forgiving spirit, if you're not willing to love your enemies, then the Bible can be dangerous in the hands of some people like that. It can be dangerous in my hands if I go at somebody with the Bible and I don't go at them with love. The Bible's good stuff, and every word is true. And God hates divorce. And an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is the permitted law of the Old Testament. But Jesus holds us to a higher standard. And that higher standard is to love so much that you don't need the law. To love so much that you wouldn't even think about murdering or stealing or coveting. To love one another. All of this is summed up in the one law: love your neighbor as you love yourself. He asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Sum up the Old Testament for us, Jesus. He clearly knew the Bible. If you look at it, where all the times Jesus quoted the Scripture. He said, the first is, they said, this is the first. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. This is the greatest of commandments. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these. That's our instruction from Jesus. Leave your hearts soft and open to other people. Be ready to understand and to feel and to care and to try. Love one another with hearts that are not hardened.